This is a 1998 Buick Century 3.1 liter V6. Now, my dad came home last night in this car, and he said that the low coolant light was on and you have an overheating problem. The car ran hotter than usual. When I plugged in my diagnostic code, I got a code telling me that the engine was basically running too hot. I don't remember what the code was. I don't have my machine with me, so I can't tell you what the, I know it was a P01, I think 25 is what I think it was. But if you ever have a car that is running hot, the radiator gets empty kind of quick, and you open the hood, you look at every hose, and you're like, everything looks fine. You know, what could it be? I don't see anything leaking. I do see a puddle of water, but I don't see anything leaking. What could be the problem? Now here it is. On this car, you might have a different problem on your 1998 Buick Century, but this is it. And you might think, what does this hose go to? This hose goes to part of the heating system. See, what happens is this hose goes on here, like this. It pushes back. Oh, not like that. It goes in here, pushes on like this, okay? I'm not going to put the hose on all the way, but that's basically how it goes on. This right here. Now, the way this works is as the water comes out the radiator, it goes through this bottom hose way down in here, and it goes through the pump, which pumps the water through the engine. And when the engine gets hot, the water goes from the intake manifold through this steel line into this rubber hose. From this rubber hose, it goes down through here and fills up in this port. Some water goes down through the pump and into the radiator, and some circulates through here and into the heating system way back there. Now, you might think, well, this hose looks fine. What's wrong with it? I mean, it's a little crack right here, but you know, other than that, it looks fine. Well, if you take the hose off and you look, the problem is, let me get a good aim at it. That right there. See? See that little crack? That's the problem. Now you might think, well, water, you know, that looks like it's a small crack. Well, yes, it is a small crack. And you might think, well, water won't blow out of that. Well, water probably wouldn't. If this was just a hose that went from a reservoir to the radiator, it probably wouldn't leak, because this hose isn't big enough to actually even allow sunlight through it. But steam has more pressure than regular old water. If you got water out of a Kentwood jug and you dumped it down there, you probably wouldn't see a leak. There's no pressure involved. There's no pressure to push that open. Now, when pressure is applied inside, pressure, you can have 5 psi or 500 psi. I mean, it depends on what the hose is on. Now, when you put pressure in there, even a small amount like 5 psi will push the guts of this hose open, and it causes steam to shoot out and water to shoot out. And the hose sits like this. So if you were just looking at it, you wouldn't see that little crack there in the hose. You have to actually run your hand around to feel it. And sometimes you might actually feel it, but not even know it. So you need to take the hose off and actually look. Now, if you didn't want to take the hose off, like if you didn't want to take it off the whole entire engine because it's a pain to take off, you can take it off like what you could do is you could put the hose on this bottom port right here, okay, like that, and get like a cork or something that you can shove in there and put a needle through and cause pressure. When I don't know, when pressure, yes, I call them, I'm doing a video. Now when you put a cork in there or something to keep the pressure from coming out, if you stick a needle through the cork and you cause pressure, if you hold your finger there, you'll actually feel air shooting out. You can do a pressure test that way. But basically, the way I found out that this is what was wrong with the car leaking water was, see how small that hole is? Okay, well this hole right here is small in diameter. But as you go further down the hose, it gets larger in diameter. So you can tell just by looking at that hose that it's been corroded around where the clamp is. Where this clamp goes right there, it's corroded, it has cracks on it, and also you can tell the hose is puffed up where it shouldn't be puffed up at. So just by looking at it, you can get an accurate guess on if it's bad or not. But to actually be certain, you can do a pressure test on the hose and see for yourself if it's leaking or not and how bad it's leaking. But when it comes to heat, heat has pressure with it. And when you heat up water, it creates steam and a lot of pressure. So if this is just a simple old radiator hose that transferred water, you probably wouldn't even notice the leak. But when you add pressure, it pushes that hole open, and that's what caused the leak. In fact, I got some water right here. So let's test this theory. Let's see. Without any pressure, just a simple little thing of water. Let's dump some water in. And see? No water's leaking out. No water. Or, see, here comes one drop. So with no pressure applied, yes, some water, like you might get a drop of water here or there. A tiny drop. So with no pressure applied to this little hole, no pressure applied, you might see one drop of water here or there. So you wouldn't notice there's a leak in this hose, because by the time you open the hood and look, the water would have already evaporated off of the hot metal. So you have to apply pressure sometimes to see a leaky hose. But if you have a 1998 Buick Century 3.1 liter V6, this hose might be the reason why you're losing pressure, the car overheats, you have a low coolant light on. So check this hose, okay? And don't just run your hand over it real quick and take a glance at it. Honestly, you know, feel it. Check for a hole, you know? And sometimes if it's a rather newer hose, you can just put tape over it and that'll fix it. You know, I know it's not a really good thing to do. When you're low on money, you use what you have. Sometimes you can cut that off and just splice on a new hose, and you can use the same hose. But in this case, this hose is the original hose put on in 1998, so we're not going to reuse it, we're going to replace it. Hope this helps.